goodness. Why make your learning curve? Let me tell you something. All these people in life that want to continue, like, are like bent on learning from experience 100%,
Yeah.
drives me crazy.
Yeah.
We're not, in the world that we know it today, we only have a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so why do you insist on learning from your own personal experience? Now, when you have to, you have to. But if you can learn from someone else's experience, or have those people in your life that are a little different, or maybe kind of compensate for your weak areas, or maybe even your strong areas, but you're tired of doing it for yourself, whatever the case may be, you have other people in your life that can teach you through their experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what you said is, I think, a really important takeaway, especially for our besties. Time is of the essence.
Girl, say it again for the people in the cheap seat.
The essence. And what we don't,
yes,
what I think we don't give enough value to is time. We don't have time. So this is the thing.
Amber, wait, I'm just because you was about to go in and you kind of stopped. You was like, you know what?
Well, right, because I'm like, look, that could be a whole nother conversation. But this is the thing. We all have time. I think sometimes we're racing against the clock and we're like, I got to be this. I have to have this. I should look like this. And we talk about comparison. Comparison is the biggest thief of joy. We don't want to do that. But a lot of times we feel like we're against the clock. And my biggest lesson is that you have time. You just don't have time to waste. And that's the difference here. And I think that's what you're saying too. By allowing yourself to learn from others' lessons, as we said, the learning curve is lessons, and the time that it takes you to get from point A to point B is now going to be minimized.
I think that takes a lot of humility, though. It takes a lot of humility, because a lot of ego will tell you, oh, I can do it better. And ego will tell you, oh, they really don't know. Or, Tiffany's the youngest of 3. I'm the oldest of 7. So our situations are completely different, So you want to use, within reason and with discernment for all things. But you got to be humble to be able to accept people's advice based on their experience. With proven, you don't want to just out there taking everybody's advice, right? But if you're not humble, you're going to be so bent on just doing everything yourself.
Especially when it comes to the freedom of starting over. I listened to your story, right? If everything was gone tomorrow, you have this space that was created by generations before you to ensure that you're going to be in a good place no matter what. I have a space that's been created for my family, similar to yours, that I would be okay no matter what. But sometimes, especially for those that are listening or watching and may not feel like they have that space or have that ability to say, you know what, if everything fails tomorrow, I'm going to land on my feet. But what I want people to hear and to understand, even in the freedom of starting over, is there's something called fail and fail fast. Failure is actually not a bad thing. Failure are the lessons that you need to be able to, again, lessen that learning curve to success. When you think about something, I'll take technology, for example, right? So when you have technology and you have deployments within technology, they do something called the minimum viable product, the MVP. And what they do is they iterate. So think about the iPhone, for example. So I'll use my iPhone, right? You get updates to your iPhone, like what we get them every few months and things like that. You have tech geniuses, right, in the background saying, what is the least amount that I can actually deploy that Tiffany Washington can use? It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to be. But we're going to learn in real time, because Tiffany is then going to tell us, you know what, you updated these text messages and now my text message is making my phone slower, for example. Or you did it and I love the new emojis. But that's going to be their minimum viable product that they can release. And what that allows them to do is fail and fail fast, which is a good thing, because they know what's working and what's not working quicker than holding everything together and then doing one big release and crossing their fingers and hoping that everything goes well and they don't learn in that quick curve that you need them to do. So I say that story because for those that may say, I don't have a landing pad, I don't really know if I have that same space that these two ladies are talking about, what I want you to understand is that although you're failing, you're learning, and that failure is actually going to make you even more
Well,
successful.
not only that, like on top of that, so the fail and fail fast, but
Mm-hmm.
I also like fail and you fail forward. So like one of my aunts, one of my older aunts, she's an educator and she's always told me, Tiffany, you got to have a goal. I don't care if you change it every 6 months, but you have to have something you're reaching towards. And then one of my other like favorite people, who's a celebrity, the famous Judge Lynn Toller.
Yes.
I don't know. I love her to death, right? She's like my what is my cyber mentor, my virtual mentor, but I know her story. And one of the things she said, people always ask me how I got here, but I literally just mistakenly ended up here by failing. So she had went to school to be a doctor and that wasn't working. And so her father was like, well, you gotta get a degree, you gotta get something. And she couldn't do anything what he would consider low. So she had to be a lawyer. So she's like, I'll do law. And he's like, all right, that's respectable. So now she's a lawyer. And so she's doing these cases, and somebody came up to her and said, oh, what do you think about being a judge? And she's like, I don't know, whatever. And so I guess I don't know all the details, but then she turns out to be a judge. And then somebody says, oh, well, what about being on TV? And so the point is this might be contrary to a lot of what's being perpetuated in this day and age, but movement is very hard to stop. It's not about busy work. I don't want to get it confused with, yes, velocity, but I don't want to get confused with busy work. But having a goal and being en route to that goal, you will find that even a fail when your emotion towards a goal can you might fall forward in a whole different spot you didn't know about. Because from your original vantage point, you couldn't see it because you were standing still. You were at the stop sign. Mm-hmm. But when you're on the route, when you're on Route 66 and you're driving, now you have a different vantage point. Oh, I didn't know this was here. I didn't know that was there. I didn't even know I can do that in this industry, right? Being in real estate, you think you're just going to be a real estate professional buying and selling houses, and then you start that path and then you learn there's so much stuff out there to do. But I would have never had that vantage point if I never would have been in motion.
And the thing about consistency also that I think is a misnomer to people, they think that you can't fail, right? When you're consistent and things like that. But consistency is just what you said. It's about consistent movement, always moving. And then that builds your velocity. And then you have trajectory. There's a lot of things that are within that, that little nugget that you said too. So thanks for sharing that.
No, I love it. I'm not a fan of calling things a failure, but if it's a failure, it's a failure. I think, and we've had this conversation recently, people are so sensitive to words. Don't get me wrong, words are powerful, but words have meaning and definition for a reason. And if you failed, you failed. Eat it, sit in it. Don't sit in it in a sense of not allow you to move, but sit in it, see what happened. Like eat it, like eat that failure, eat whatever the negative connotation is, so you can see it from its full, vantage and its full scope, and then you're able to move forward. But sometimes you don't learn from failures, and that's the truth. That's the reality of it.
And sometimes then that's when you relive that lesson too.
Yeah. And you know what? This is going to probably sound really grim. In some lessons, you're going to die trying to learn.
Yeah.
I can talk to my grandmother. I don't even know how old she is. Sorry, grandma. I can talk to her and there's still lessons she's trying to understand. So the idea that every negative or every failure needs to be some big eureka moment can be counterproductive at times, because you're sitting in the mess trying to figure it out, when in all actuality, you just stubbed your toe. Like accidents happen or failures happen.
Now that's the thing, because I think there's also criticality levels when it comes to failure. And I think
very true. Very true. Oh my goodness. Yes. There are levels. There's definitely levels to different things. And I think that sometimes, to your point, we just push them all in the same bucket.
Yeah.
Like if you had a bad hair day, right, or you ran out of gas, it's different from getting in a car accident. Like, come on now.
Correct. And that's also the lesson, especially, for me to be transparent. I am a huge overthinker. I haven't always been a huge overthinker, but as I've aged, I think I've become one. And um not not understanding there are levels to things, right? Everything to me would just seem larger than it was. So to your point, you stubbed your toe compared to like you broke your foot. Well, I'm acting like I broke my foot and I stubbed my toe, and then I have to take a step back, a true step back, and say, okay, Amber, like, did anybody die? As I say, did
Yes.
anybody know? Okay, so then how do we proceed? How do we, move forward when it comes to that? So that's a really big lesson too, I think, that you shared around even just the toe stub.
In my circle, right, my life counsel, it's always, are we being a wee bit dramatic right now? Just a
Yeah.
smidge? Are we just being a smidge? I mean, if we're being dramatic, then we're being dramatic, but let's just recognize.
Well, and that's also, I think, in the freedom of starting over, I think you also have to have individuals around you that allow, number one, you to have the space to learn, but then the space to tell you the truth. Because I'll use us, like I've had conversations with you, like I'll text you and be like, I went down a rabbit hole, right? And then you'll call me and we'll have a conversation. And although you might be like, girl, what are you talking about? Like you do, and you admittedly say, okay, let me try to understand it from your side. let me, the empathy, let me, get into that. And
I appreciate that because empathy is kind of hard for me. I won't lie. It's a wee bit challenging.
but you know what? But I think that is, again, going back to how people show up in your life, and
Mhm.
that symbiotic relationship and things like that. Although, you just said, hey, sometimes it might be hard for me to take that step back and be like, what the hell is Amber actually talking about? Because I want to tell her, girl, shut up. Like, it is like you are going crazy. But it's growing even your capabilities of saying, okay, me showing up in this way isn't helpful. Right? How can I do it? And then me learning in real time as I might tell you things that are happening and I hear myself saying them. And then I'm like, God, I'm being kind of dramatic right now, huh? Like, and it's a learning curve
Just
too.
a smidge.
So it's a journey on both sides, but you have to have those individuals as you're thinking through it. But when
Yes.
we're talking about the freedom of starting over holistically and understanding that it is a journey for people, I do want everyone to understand that sometimes you just need to start over because the road that you were on was not the correct one for you. And sometimes the doors are closed because we weren't going to walk out of them ourselves. And sometimes we say this isn't for us and we jump out a damn window to get away from the burning building. Like whatever it is. Or sometimes it's you make a decision where on the outside, everybody's like, that seemed like a great opportunity, or you were in a great place, but in your gut, in your soul, you're like, this is not where I'm supposed to be, or this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And you have to confidently and through fear and trepidation still move in the direction of your dreams regardless. So the freedom of starting over sometimes can be a little bit scary on the front end, but in the back end, there is freedom and freshness to the decisions that you're making.
Yes. And I think sometimes this day and age, we do forget about our lineage, or our ancestors, so to speak. We do forget. I think if more people knew their family history,
Yeah.
one of my uncles is like our family historian. Let me tell you something. and he knows about
Okay.
random cousins, random cousins who was in this war or that war. But I think once you realize
Mm-hmm.
the different genes that you have running through you,
Mm.
it's not you. You don't have to go all the way back to Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman. You can literally go to your parents or your grandparents. And if you look at it from a mature perspective, even everybody has issues with their parents, right? Some more than others. I know it might be easier for me to look at my parents and look at my grandparents because I had all four of them, and I'm able to have my own relationship with them. I'm able to ask them these questions, and if I call my grandma right now, I could, probe her brain, and I have an easier connection with my parents and my grandparents. But I think if more people looked like, because if you think about it, it's your parents' first time here too,
It is.
and it's your grandparents' first time here, as we know it, right? So allowing them, like you would want your friends to allow you the space, allowing your parents the space and your grandparents the space, and to understand the day and age that they lived in, to understand the options of the choices that they've had, and to really go deep as to why they made the decisions that they made. Many times, not all, right, but many times you can glean a sense of strength from it, because I'm pretty sure there's no generation that didn't have to make hard decisions. You had to make hard decisions. And if you were to have a child and she talked to you about different things, you'll be like, I had to make a hard decision. And she's going to have to make hard decisions. And your mom and your father, I'm pretty sure, having his own brokerage, and your mom being corporate, everybody has to make hard decisions. And then they live to tell the story. And if you can glean from that, from your parents or your grandparents, or that generational wealth that started prior to you, whether it be financial, physically, or spiritually, or just emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
there's a different strength that comes from that, because you're not starting from scratch most times. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule, but you're not starting from scratch. There's somebody that came before you that did some things that allowed you to be the place that you are now.
I love that you're not starting from scratch. I think, a lot of times when it comes to success, although you may be the person, as we say, like in the gym shooting, and there's nobody in there with you, there's still going to be places and spaces and people that have gotten you to that place. I say in spite of yourself, because there's probably choices that you made that were not the best, but you still
Nope. Say that one more time. Reverse.
You got there in spite of yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. In spite of yourself, with yourself, and with the support of others. And so taking a step back, one thing I would find myself doing, especially, we've talked about this, like not being married, not having children. And as I kept going through different ages, I would think like, oh, by now my mom would have been married, right? Or my mom would have had me by now. And, I'm the only child, so I don't have other like brothers and sisters to kind of think through that. But I would always kind of juxtapose my journey with where she would be and say like, I wonder what she thought when she made X, Y, and Z decision, right? And so then I think for my future child, whenever that may happen, what are going to be the choices that they're going to think about? Like, how did my mom think through and to get here? And, I always think, am I doing things in a way and making the decisions that can enable them, right, to have the freedom to start over? Because what we don't want to happen, and we've talked about this, is for that to die with us. Because you can make poor decisions, and then the generations after you are not given the same opportunities that you had.
I drops mic. You're absolutely positively right. I think looking, and I've done that. That's crazy. I didn't know people did that. I thought my mom was my age. She had 3 babies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
When I was in my early 20s, I remember having a conversation with my mom. I'm like, Mom, you had 3 kids by now. Like, I don't even know where my socks are.
Right.
What is going on?
My dog? Like,
I'm like, Mom. And then that, and in the past times were different. You know what I mean? I'm like, Mom, the strength that you've had, And even if, um, a lot of people may say they're like you were saying, I'm the one that's going to break. Everybody's doing this whole break generational curses thing. Everything's a trend to me. I'm not very trendy, whack. But this whole break generational curses thing, and I'm thinking, like, but do I really want to break that strength aspect? I mean, with your parents and your grandparents, it's like take what you can and leave what you can't.
Mm-hmm.
But do I want to break the fact that I look back and I think my mom was like super strong? Do I just want to just go bust down the door and say, I want to be completely different? I don't want that. You know what I mean? And even with my grandparents, like, because they're, our most grandparents are about a lot more traditional, but taking some strength from that. So that way, when it is time to start over, it's like, do you know where I came from? Do you know that my mom had 3 kids by the time she was 22? And look at me now, I got a corporate job. What is this? This is a cakewalk. And maybe that's my family being into sports a lot, just having that very like not grimy, but tough mentality with sports.
More like gritty. It's gritty.
There you go. That gritty mentality. Like, what is this? This is a cakewalk. Okay, the Excel sheet, the spreadsheet was all okay. Not to say you don't want to do well at your job, and I can be a little bit of a perfectionist, but that starting over aspect, what I'm talking about, or that failing aspect. Like, what are we failing? Like, is this really a life fail, or is it like you say, a life lesson? So I think looking back, and then I don't have any children, but I do have 2 nieces and 2 nephews. And if they using that for a level of strength, or any children that you may have a good relationship with, like I don't have kids, but if my nieces think like, man, what would auntie do? Or my nephew, like, man, my auntie, she was on the phone with me and she told me she did da, 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 da. Like having a sense of obligation to the next generation, I think is a bigger piece than making money for the next generation.
And we've talked about that, about the obligation to the next generation. And even in the fact that our past generations have afforded us the opportunity that if we have to start over, that we can. But our choices, and this is something that's come from you specifically, right? Like our choices have to be forward facing. Our choices can't be selfish. They have to be selfless to allow it to happen.
This day and age, when I tell you, Amber, it's so selfish. It's nauseating. It literally makes me sick, right? And what happens, what I don't like is we say principles in itself that are necessary, but they're tainted. We taint it by really using it for a force of selfishness. We take things like self-love in itself. Hey, so yeah, you want to meditate, you want to make sure you clean your space and clean. Yes, but then it's weaponized and it's used to promote these and live these selfish lives. And we blur the lines so much, right? Without reason and discernment, and without a life counsel, so to speak, or a board of directors in your life. You have nobody to reel you back in. Like, okay, now this is not self-love no more. It's selfish. I think it's so many things, principles like that. I just use self-love as an example, but there's so many principles like that in itself sounds good, right? And it's necessary. But I do think a lot of people in this day and age, they blur that line to complete selfishness and not caring about their people before them or the people after them.
Yeah, I think what you said about self-love is actually an interesting point, because I think there is a point to what you're saying where self-love becomes selfish if you're not enabling those that are going to come after you, right? So I can want the best for myself, and I can love myself, and I can want to afford myself opportunities. And, we use a lot of times examples around, are you quick to market with being able to go get a career? And then, what's the curve of increasing your income and, your wealth that you're building and things like that? Or, am I going to take, I don't know, a 5-year sabbatical and go into Tibet and like sit with monks and like figure out life journey? As I always say, I think it's a both and. So what you're saying is have the self-love. So if you know you want to do a sabbatical and you know that that's a part of your journey in your life, instead of doing 5 years, maybe you do 1 so that you can actually have that selflessness. So to say, I know I need to think about how I'm going to impact those around me by making these choices. And then I go back and I can do X, Y, and Z. So it's a meet in the middle kind of mentality instead of throwing everything, the baby away with the bathwater and saying, this is wholly about myself. With
You
no
taught me that phrase, throw the baby away with the bathwater. I was like, this Amber's crazy, but you're absolutely right. Or what I usually say is don't shoot your foot trying to spite your leg. But it's
Yeah.
the same concept. Same concept.
Yes. Or I mean, now we're gonna go with old adages, or cut your nose to spite your face.
You know, I'm all about tradition. I'm with it.
Guys, if you don't leave with anything else, you'll leave with some good sayings from
very much so. I think you have a point.
Yeah.
I think that there is a level of self-love that can be truly beneficial to sacrificing for those that love you and those that you love.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. So I think, as we close for our Virgo Ambition besties, what we do know is that life is a journey, and the journey is in between the beginning and the end. It's everything in there that we're going to learn. There is freedom in starting over, that who you were yesterday doesn't dictate who you're going to be today and or tomorrow. The choices that you've made yesterday, if you feel like that's not the direction that you want to go, you can change that. But we have to be thoughtful about, not only ourselves that we're impacting, but when we talk about generational wealth, how are we creating those same opportunities for the lineage that comes after us? But Tiffany, if there's one thing in your journey or as you look to the future that you think that could help your new besties that are listening and watching in today, what would one thing be?
I'm trying to find the right words because you know what I'm scared of, right? So
You're fine. You're fine.
I don't want to get canceled.
Good.
Listen to your mom and listen to your dad. Listen to them. Listen to your parents. Listen to your grandparents. They love you beyond what you can even imagine, regardless of the situation that you've come from. Because I know of lots of stories where, it's very unfortunate, but the simple fact that they gave you life, and most people are in situations where it wasn't all bad. You got some bad, you got some good. Some of it's a lot more good than bad, and some of it's vice versa. But glean what you can from them, because regardless of how you think about it, you are them. I'm half my father, half my mother, and if you keep going down, I'm a summation of the choices that they've made up until now. And like you were, to your point, when it gets to me, I learn from them. I learned from my ancestors. I learned from the past. I learned from the decisions that were made for me as a child. But then I take that, I flip it and reverse it, right? And then I get prepared in what you're saying for the next generation to come. And with that, if you always understand that you are not starting from scratch, I don't care where you come from, you are not starting from scratch. There's some, because you're here. Mm-hmm. There's somebody somewhere that cared something about you to do something to continue to make you survive. Because honestly, babies and toddlers and things, you won't be able to survive unless somebody was to assist you. Now, there's, like you say, it's not all, but most times, there's somebody somewhere that cared enough about you, and you can glean lessons from that.
I think that's perfect. I'm just putting it on the screen for those of you that are watching. Listen to those that came before you. You are the embodiment of and I did there wrong. Let me fix that really quickly, of their choices, dreams, and desires. When it comes to generational wealth, going back to our original conversation, yes, there's wealth building financially, but at least so much more than that. That's only a piece of it. we have to be really thoughtful of, you know, the story that not only we came from, but the story that we're creating for those that are coming after us. And I think that's what you're saying too. So
Yes.
I,
Yes. I
I,
need a t-shirt with that on there.
I mean, I think that's right. I think that's like spot on. And again, as we always say, you know, we're ever learning, we're ever growing. We don't have it all figured out. We don't know it all, but there is freedom in being able to start over. There is freedom in being able to have um, the safety and that kind of go-getterness to say that this isn't working for me. What else am I going to do? Um, so I appreciate you, Miss Tiffany Washington,
Lord. Oh Lord.
us today, your Virgo Ambition besties. This will not be the last conversation that we have. And we really appreciate you even taking the time to drop these jewels with us and having a really good conversation because, you know I've learned some things, even that, and we've had multiple conversations even from this. So, you know, it's only upward and onward from here. And
Upward and onward. You know, that's my phrase. Upward and onward. Yes, agreed. And I appreciate this is my first podcast experience. My first video podcast experience. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. We're here. We're rooting for you, as your ambitious besties, and keep making us proud. Thank you.
No, thank you.